Hey everybody, today I have Gabby Payne with me, and so Gabby, welcome. Yeah, I think you and I we've known each other here. We at least have talked, over the last number of years. So thanks for joining the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
I think we met probably around 2018, and I know you reached out to me. You had read my book, The Consultant's Code, and then you reached out to me, and we had a really good conversation. And then tried, I don't think we've kept in touch as often as probably we should, but it's been nice to keep in touch and see how the progress is going. So, why don't you tell me like a little bit about what you're currently doing? But I would like to start back from when we met and kind of walk through, because I think the individuals that the people that listen, many of them are consultants, but some are thinking about becoming consultants. And I think your path is really something that's sort of, I don't want to say is unique, but it's something that is, you definitely had a plan. And so I wanted to just kind of share that with everybody. So maybe you could just share where you're at right now and what you're doing. And then we can kind of go back in time and from when we kind of met and go from there.
Yeah, so I currently am the principal and founder of the Boss Blueprint Agency, and we're a brand strategy agency and a full service brand management agency. So I like to tell people that we do everything related to brand. So we start at brand identity for businesses that are trying to really find their space in the market. We do brand strategy just from an annual strategic planning perspective. And then we do brand management, and that's when you hit the digital marketing, the event activation, and things of that nature. And we work primarily with nonprofits. And also now we're starting to get into government work as well. So it's a really exciting time for us. We're expanding rapidly. My team has grown to 3 this year. So it's just a really exciting time altogether.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing I want to point out is that for anybody listening, the one thing that Gabby did really well here, I want to point it out, is Gabby knows what she does, and she was able to articulate that, and who she does it for. So I know you're in the brand space, which is so you probably have. I wouldn't say you have an advantage over everybody who isn't in that space, but I wanted to point it out because a lot of times I think consultants that we go in and we kind of go, well, I can kind of solve problems, and they're looking for anybody with a problem to solve. And I think that's problem number one for the consultant, because knowing exactly what you do and who you do it for is really critical, because otherwise, customers have no idea how you can help them if it's just I can do everything. So yeah,
No, I,
yeah,
I agree 100% with that sentiment. I find that the reason why we've been able to be successful as an agency is that we understand our customer, and as a result, we understand what's important to them and what's urgent to them. And when it comes to building a consulting business, you want to be in the business of solving urgent problems, because businesses have a million problems. And as a business owner that has a business that has problems, there are certain problems I'm not willing to deal with right now because it's just not critical enough. And so I think that's really important to remember as you start a consulting practice or as you run your own consulting practice, is finding like those critical problems that people have that are important to them, that they're willing to pay money for, so that instead of you sending 10 follow-up emails, they're sending you 10 follow-up emails.
yeah, I like that. And one of the things, like a lot of listeners some are independent consultants, some have small firms, and some they're again either thinking about going into consulting, and some are like they work for large firms like one of the big four, or some of the firms like that. And the one thing I think, it's interesting, because I think a lot of consultants will kind of think, well, if you're independent or you got a small firm, it's different than being with the big firms. But I think as a consultant, your role is really the same, and it's looking for those opportunities, those issues with that client, and trying to really, I won't say harvest it, but that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve their problems, and by the nature of solving their problems, we get paid. And the more we can find those, the better off we're going to be if we're even have our own firm or work for someone else. So yeah, I think that's always good advice.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that I do now are similar. I would say the biggest difference now is owning your own practice, you have to become really great at business development, which is just really networking, following up and leveraging your own network to identify clients. And it kind of goes back to what we said in the beginning, when you kind of know who you serve and you know what's critical to them, then you can kind of figure out what rooms to get in to meet the right people. Because what's happening at the top before the project gets to you as the consultant is there are tons of conversations that are happening because people meet people and talk to them and get to know them and understand what's important to them and things like that. So whereas a consultant, sometimes I can just kind of think back to being on the floor. I wasn't necessarily thinking from that perspective. I was more so thinking about what problems are we going to solve and what are the different tactical work that we need to do to solve it, as opposed to how can we maintain this relationship with this client and what will they need next, and how can we set it up so that it's a retainer project and not a one-off. And it's just a different, I heard a term, I was on a panel last week and I heard a term, 12th floor and 7th floor. So you've got to be on both floors once you're running your own agency, for sure.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it's the word business development, I think also it sometimes freaks a lot of people out, but I always think of business development as being, I always go back and say, if somebody's in their dating days, it's like being in your current days. But when you're dating,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, you have to have an idea of who your ideal partner might be, and and then figure out where are they hanging out, who do they hang out with, what is it that they're looking for, and start to kind of present that. I think just like dating, when people just go out and they find anybody who's available, there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of suffering, a lot of mistakes, right? But if you narrow it down and have an idea of this is who I'm looking for, and I'm not going to stop until I find that, because I think that's it. And maybe you need to broaden the parameters a little bit if they're too narrow. But I think it's very similar. I think that people often get tied up with the business development going out. I'm kind of worried about it, but it's really just presenting yourself in that form and then looking for people that meet what you're looking for. So
Yeah. All about the urgency and all about getting in the right roles and understanding that in the beginning, you're going to most likely there's going to have to be a financial investment to get yourself into the right rooms. Because in the beginning, you're not going to have that network. And so I realized at the beginning of my practice that I had a relationship deficit, is what I call it. And if your parents aren't like uber wealthy and weren't like an executive, you probably have a relationship deficit too, if you're listening to this. And so you have to remember, like, you have to play catch up with everyone else you're competing against that may already have that network. And sometimes money will help you to go faster in that respect. And when I say invest, I mean going to conferences that may cost you $2,000 because you know that everyone else paid $2,000 to be there. And hey, if they're willing to pay $2,000, then this might be a good place to be, because that tells you that they're serious about the topic at hand.
Yes, I like that. Brian Tracy, I think it's Brian Tracy, said that he talks about 3%. So he says, like, if you invest 3%, like, so if somebody, let's say, wants to make $100,000, right? Take 3%, which would be $3,000, and invest that in their development. So it could be learning, it could be, but courses conferences are a big thing, because, especially when someone starts to make more money. And I know this freaks some people out, where they go, hey, I'm just trying to pay my bills. But at a certain point, once you start to make some more money, you realize, yeah, I do have to be around people who, who I'm rubbing shoulders with, and they're in that, and they're kind of in the game just like me, and be around those individuals. And a lot of that is the conferences and spending that time and then just building that out. And if somebody goes in and they meet two people, sometimes that makes a world of difference. So it's, well worth it.
Yeah. And then keep in mind that the sooner you do it, the better. I mean, most of my clients on average take 3 to 6 months to close from the date that I meet them. And that's because I know my data. But there are clients that I've known for a year, and they're in my pipeline for next year. And they've given me what I call a yellow light, meaning we're ready. Here's the date. And when that date comes, we'll see, if it goes through. But for the most part, we say it's the 75% yes. And so the earlier you get into those rooms and the sooner you get into those rooms, the better, because it's not going to always be an immediate yes. And many times there's going to be, I followed up with a person 12 times before we started the project. So just kind of keep in mind like that timeline. It's going to take some time to build those relationships.
Yes. Yeah, I like that reminder, because I know for myself, at some point, I know in my consulting career, I looked at it and I said, I have to take ownership, even though I was working for a firm. And I really looked at my career and said, I'm going to operate like I'm on my own. I'm doing my own thing, which really allowed me to start building out those relationships. And I like the timeline, because somebody had told me one time that, everybody's in their own cycle, right? And so the person used the example of a refrigerator, and they said, if when you walk into an appliance store and you're looking for a refrigerator, the sales rep doesn't know when you want it. So they come up and they say, can I help you out? And, people are irritated because they go, no, I'm looking for a refrigerator from my house that I'm building next year, and I'm just looking. Or somebody else goes, yeah, my refrigerator broke this morning and I need it now. Where are the salespeople? Because I want them now. And understanding that people are on all these different cycles, and sometimes they're testing you to see, is this person, I already got my team locked up, but I want to see, is this person, can they cut it?
Are they real? Because we live in a business world today where, on the panel, I said this, we live in a dual business world. There's a business world of people who walk around pretending they have a business, pretending they're making money, pretending they're working with clients. And then there's a business world of people who actually do it. And I think it's becoming more and more difficult to decipher which is which. And the ladies who were on the panel, one had an accounting practice, the other had a legal practice, shook their heads yes, because it's a real thing. And so people have to protect their brands as well. And so that means they have to vet the service providers they work with, because if for some reason a scandal comes out about you next year, they don't want their name attached to that. So they have to make sure that you're the right fit for them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I like it. One thing that your agency has come, because I think when we first started talking back in 2019, it took a few different iterations, or had a few different views. And I want to talk about that now, because I think that, and then we'll kind of maybe step into, when you and I first met, because I find that's kind of an interesting story about what you were doing then and stuff like that. But your firm really took you kind of clarified it as you went, because I think it's different than what you and I had talked about, 4 years ago. So maybe can you talk about that transition, or I don't say it's a transition, but the process that you took to kind of get the agency that you have now?
Yeah. So when I was in college, because it's kind of really stemmed from then, I knew I wanted an event planning firm. Like, I knew it. I was like the program coordinator for my sorority. I mean, people knew me for events. Like, they knew, like, if you want to know where the best party is, you can call Gabby. If you want to know where the best restaurant to eat at, I just really had a very robust social life. And so I started hosting these events. At the time, I was losing money by doing this. My thought process is, I'll host my own events, and that's how we'll get our name out there. It was not the best idea for where the business was, and there could have been different ways I did it. But I mean, the way I see it is I learned so much from that, and I learned like, hey, I can really do this. And so from that point, I decided, well, since I'm really good at events, I want to do business events. And so then I started doing business seminars and events and things of that nature. And I was using social media to promote those events. And around that same time, I was working at a manufacturing company, And I was initially in charge of bringing the order management department from Maryland to the Mexico office because I studied international business. I had done some work before in Ecuador, and I was doing like Six Sigma and all that kind of stuff. So it just made perfect sense. I was a perfect candidate for the role. So I brought it down to Mexico, and I kind of worked my way up to being the plant manager's like right hand. And so I became the revenue manager at that facility. Um, and then I was contacted by a consulting firm that actually poached me because I believe when we met Andy, I was trying to find a role in consulting and I just was not getting anywhere. And it was actually when I stopped looking that they found me. And they found me because I was posting on social media about business on LinkedIn. And so around that time, I probably took a step back from the business. But I was still kind of doing a few things for the business. And I will say the last year of me working there, I worked there for 3 years, is when I realized that I was really good at social media. I had people approaching me to run their social media. And that was really how things just quickly shifted all the way from event planning to business events to being a business consultant to being a brand consultant. So it was a really quick transition, and I was leveraging the knowledge that I was learning on my day-to-day job to really support businesses and show them how they could apply the same things that larger businesses kind of already had in place and already knew. And so that's pretty much what landed me here. And so in 2020, right before Thanksgiving break, I gave them my 2 weeks notice, and that was it. And now here we are. I think now it's November 1st, so I think we're 3 years in full time now. Team of 3, and we also have like some other partners that we work with from time to time. So it's exciting, and it's mind blowing to just see like how far we've come.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's and I'm happy, when I see you post on LinkedIn, and I do want to talk about this in a little bit about your involvement in the community and different things that you actually, because I want to kind of wrap up with that conversation. But I'm really always quite happy, quite proud when I see your LinkedIn post and see how you're doing. So yeah, I'm happy for that. You were working for a company in Mexico, and I think you were living in Brownsville at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, so Gabby was, and I think she's the only person I know. I live in Arizona now, so of course, I'm not far from the Mexican border, and there are places where there's factories on the Mexican side where it's kind of a joint factory between U.S. and Mexico on producing goods. And so Gabby's I think she's the only person I know that actually worked there. I always found that fascinating, these factories that situate right on the border, and so that's where we met each other. And can you tell me, like you told me a little bit about but can you tell me a little bit about that job and what you learned and maybe some of the challenges that you faced while you were in that position?
Yeah, so honestly, that role was so tough for me. I was the youngest person in the room a lot of times. I was the only woman in the room a lot of times. I was the only Black person in the room a lot of times. It was a really tough role. There were a lot of cultural challenges that I faced. And there was just a lot of, the manufacturing industry is very monolithic, meaning like it's not very multicultural, it's not very diverse. It is a STEM field, right? So it fits the bill. And so it was really hard. I think it motivated me though to kind of prove to people like, hey, I can figure this out just like you can. And I found a few people who were willing to kind of champion me. And I think especially for those who are really looking and saying like, okay, I am in a rough work culture, I think, to really just focus on the people who are championing you and just really lean into that, because what I find is that sometimes we get caught up in the negative and the things that aren't working. And so once I was able to identify those champions, that is what kind of helped me propel forward. And I will say, like, looking back, I was young. I didn't have the people skills I have now. I was just kind of like, screw them all, we're just gonna get it done and forget that. But and I was just such a wildfire, if you will.
Yeah.
But I was good. I was good at what I did. I was able to truly execute. And so I would say, like, the number one thing I learned from there is, like, there is no replacement in this world for excellence and showing up every day and being great every day. You don't have to be perfect every day, but you do need to be excellent every day and put your best foot forward. So that was probably the biggest thing I learned at that role.
Yeah. You touched on a couple of things. One is, I think that one mistake I think people make is not asking for help. I think, and I know as often people who want to go into consulting, we're usually, and I hate that type A, type B thing, but often we want to do it, right? So we're pretty driven, but I think it's we don't have to do it all ourselves. And I think the ability to go out and actually ask for help or reach out to somebody, even if it's just to ask a few questions, which you did with me. You reached out to me and we talked, and I think that's a big difference. I think I see, I actually feel for people who just refuse the advice or reaching out for help. And I think there's the acceptance of unsolicited advice where people just, they're not asking for it. But I do think that when people are really need some help, is just asking, because I think we're surprised, or would be surprised, how often people want to help and are willing to help. So
I think you mentioned something earlier too about just accountability for your own career path. And I think that really made the difference too, because I was a documentation warrior, meaning if I had a meeting with my manager and we agreed on something, I emailed him with what we agreed on, because a lot of times companies are confined to their budgets and things like that, but that's not my problem because that's not what we agreed to. So I made sure that if you said that we were going to do SAP, we're doing SAP. I don't care what you got to do to figure it out, but that's what we agreed to. So that's what we need to do. And you really do have to manage up a lot in those scenarios, because it's just a part of, your growth and development. No one else is going to, there's a rare time when you get that person who just really just is like, oh, this person is great and awesome and that kind of thing. But 9 times out of 10, most of the mentors I have, they came because I proved myself to them and I showed them that I'm worth you putting your name on the line and your energy on the line to support me. And I made sure that I was always in the driver's seat of my goals and wasn't expecting other people to do more for me than I was willing to do for myself.
I like that. Yeah. I think that the thing too is that we see a lot we're bombarded with the differences between people. And I think that it's really important because we have more similarities. I mean, if we're looking for differences, we can find differences because we're all unique people, but there's actually more similarities than what we think. And so even though someone may look and say, well, I don't want to, reach out to this individual, or you said, like, try to even, I don't want to say push, but, challenge a mentor, challenge someone. We actually find that we actually have a lot more similarities, and often people are looking to see those, and the backgrounds of people are, quite unique anyways. And so I find that even though there's obvious differences between individuals, but there's a lot more similarities that we have with each other. So
you're absolutely right. I have had, camaraderie and just like strong work relationships with people who I never would have imagined I would have a relationship with otherwise. And it really is about, I think the first thing that you want to establish in relationships at work, and even as you build an agency, is the first thing you establish is the respect factor. And people, I always talk about the excellence, because if you're excellent, it's like half of the equation. Because people respect a person who takes their name seriously and a person who takes their brand seriously. Meaning, if Gabby's name is on it, it's good. Like,
Mm.
it got to the point when I was working at the consulting firm that they would call it the Gabby effect. They said, "Oh, just sit Gabby and she'll figure it out," because they knew that I knew how to get results and that I would give it 110%. And if I left the room and couldn't come to a resolution, there was a huge, huge issue that was way bigger than me and potentially even bigger than the project that might have been happening, like, organizationally, because people will align with you if they know that you're always going to show up every time.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. What were I actually wanted to point on something with the factory, because one of the things I worked in a factory for a year and a half before I went to college. I worked in a cabinet factory, then a fishing boat factory, and I find it, for people who've worked in factories, you'll know this, because you're exposed to the assembly line. You're exposed to all of the different resources that are being produced. The fact that there's limited storage space, warehouse space, or you've got to load stuff onto trucks or trains or whatever it is. There's a whole, I mean, it's just an army of things that are going on in a factory. For people who haven't been exposed to a factory, if you can get a tour of a factory, I would take it. I would take it, ask lots of questions. I also would read books around, like, process, process development and things like that. I find that the factory work has helped me so much, because I I find so many problems. Actually, I'm able to see problems that maybe somebody who hasn't been exposed to that has, and it doesn't mean that somebody has to be. But I find it just something that, I think we can kind of see how the pieces, fit together. And so I really kind of encourage anybody who hasn't worked in a factory to do that, because, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. One of the things that I've noticed, so like I said, my job was to bring the order management division from Maryland to Mexico. And so I was responsible for developing all those standard operating procedures. And I think, like, knowing that, and then having access to the technology that we have today with tools that can put together a SOP for you just by a screen record, which is just nuts, right? It really helps you understand bottlenecks, which I think is essential to your growth, because you'll understand where you're at capacity in your business and where you may need to add support and who you need to hire. And so this is more, I'm speaking like from the agency perspective, is I started to get a firm understanding that I had an issue from capacity standpoint. And then I started to pinpoint those issues. And so one of those areas was proposals, right? Usually like a very long process for any consultant, especially if you are not like selling them a standardized program and you're really going based on the problems that you've seen that they have. Like, being able to go in and look at that and say, okay, this is my proposal writing process. What can we do differently to speed it up? How can we add in some staff to support this process? And so now I have a staff member to support that process, which means that we can reach out to more clients, we can turn around more proposals, and we can take advantage of more opportunities. But I don't think without that exposure and without the exposure to Six Sigma, that I would have been able to spot those things and solve them as quick as I am now.
Yeah, I think it's always, I think it's a great experience for those who have had it, and for those who haven't, I just would really study it, because there's ways of learning those, and some people they do actually naturally know, okay, these are how things piece together. But yeah, definitely, I find that just recognizing the chain and what are critical parts of the process. So you were working for the factory in Mexico, and then you started working for a consulting firm. So maybe we can kind of take your path forward, because I do have a couple of questions.
I can remember it.
Yeah.
I think when I first started out, we were at the steel factory out in Portland. Then we went to their second location in Oakland, California. From there, I think I was on the analysis trail. So I think we were in Utah at the energy plant. Then we were in South Carolina at the battery remanufacturing plant. We were at the laundry facility in Las Vegas. They did all the laundry for the hotels. We did the military vehicle manufacturing. That was cool, seeing tanks every day. And then we did, I'm trying to remember. And then we also did a project in Mexico there too. And they did, it was remanufacturing like brake parts or something like that. So that was a really exciting journey. I was able to move to senior consultant within 2 years being in that role. Should have been earlier, I will say. There was a lot of politics happening. Should have been much earlier. I probably should have had the role in year 1 because that's how good I was. And I'm not even saying it like that. I was just, I picked it up very fast. But that job really taught me how to quickly assess a situation. Because during analysis, you were there for a few days and you had a few days to kind of pick up on all the lost productivity throughout the day so that we could identify where the bottlenecks in the process were. And also you had to quickly build rapport with people because you had to get information out of them. And so it taught me those two things, how to quickly build rapport with people and also how to really easily deduce all the details without necessarily having all the details.
Mm. Yeah. And so when you were doing this, you were still working on building your own agency, right? While you were, yeah. So one question that one of the listeners, Michael, reached out to me and he was asking questions. He was really asking questions around training. Kind of how does he find time? Because he's working for one of the big 4 firms, but he was asking about how do I find time to, get more training. He's tired and working like that. And so I thought this is a good question because really building your own agency is really the same. You're trying to learn and you're trying to actually get tasks done. How did you approach that? Because I know it's a huge undertaking. I had to do the same thing, but I'm just curious, how did you just do that and keep with it and find the energy and the time to just, build that out and go through those steps?
I would say you have the energy and you have the time. The question is, how are you using your energy and how are you using your time? So I would say those were probably the most disciplined years of my life. I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, get some work done for my business, go into the office at 6, leave the office at 5 p.m., come home. If I hadn't hit the gym in the morning, hit the gym when I came back to the hotel, worked on my business all night long, woke up, repeat. Mm-hmm. Weekends, business. Like I sacrificed those 3 years for the most part. I mean, if there was important stuff going on, I told my friends, I'll come out for birthdays, celebrations, and important stuff. And if I just need a break. Outside of that, I can't hang out with you guys every night and I can't do that kind of stuff because I'm really trying to build something here. And in the beginning, I would say it might be a little more challenging, but once you start to get that momentum, that will definitely carry you. Like once you start to see, like, I think I made like $3,000 in 1 week and I was just like,
it's worth it.
I could probably do the thing for real, right? And so it's those little moments that'll kind of carry you through. But remember, it's always a decision. It's always a decision. The decision is always yours. And it's really just about the daily choices you make. And you don't have to do that every single day. Maybe you just lock in, maybe Saturdays is your day. Maybe Fridays is your day. It's like, hey, full 8 hours every Saturday that I give to this, right? And maybe 1 hour every day during the week or however you split it, whatever works for you. But you've got to give the time and energy. It's like garden. It's like a child. It takes time, it takes energy for it to grow, and you have to be a part of that process. So a lot of people ask me that same question, and a lot of time, like I said, they have the time. So I would say write down your schedule for the day. From the moment you wake up, record every single thing that you do for the day, and then look back at it and see where you're scrolling on social media, see where you're watching, I don't know, the same Sports Center replay that's been on all day, the same cycle, the same cycle. You've already heard the guy say this. You don't need to listen to it anymore, right? So
Yeah.
I think you make time for a little bit of joy within your day, but you've gotta, if you want that, if you want your own company, you've gotta buckle down, and it's going to be, you know, a rough 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes you, but it'll be still worth it in the end. Because now I wake up when I want to. Back then I woke up at 4 a.m., but now I can wake up at 11 if I really wanted to, you know? So
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because I remember one Saturday I knew I was wasting a lot of time when I saw the same Biggie video for the seventh time, and I realized that I could tell what video was coming next. I thought I got to go do something. But yeah, it happens to all of us. So
No,
um,
it does. It does.
yeah. So maybe I do have a couple of questions I want to follow up, but I do want to lead into the agency now. I know you kind of gave us some kind of broad brushstrokes, and you nailed kind of who you do work for and what you do. But can you maybe elaborate more on it, so that people kind of know, and maybe even like how you kind of came to this specific niche.
So when I first started out, I was working primarily with entrepreneurs. And when I went full time in my business, I was working primarily with entrepreneurs, and I've returned to that, and I'll talk about it in a second. But I would say 2022, the spring of 2022, is when I started noticing the signs that I will say that the economy had changed, since we're not in a recession, or so they say. So I immediately started researching recession strategies for businesses, because I noticed my sales were declining, and I was just like, we just got to a good space. Like, I've got to figure something out. At the time, I had already been approached by one nonprofit to work with them. And so I said, I wonder if there's a market there. So I started going after nonprofits. Now, I was kind of in the nonprofit space, working as a service provider to the nonprofits. And then this opportunity opened up for me, because I had experience already serving entrepreneurs, to support nonprofits that service entrepreneurs. And so I still got to do what I loved. And even better, the entrepreneurs don't even have to pay for it, so it's kind of like awesome sauce. So now we're in a space today where we work through the nonprofits, but we're also in the process of launching 2 programs that'll be directly for entrepreneurs. So the first one will go live in December, and that's the Organized CEO. And that program in particular is focused on entrepreneurs who have been running their business for some time. They're making at least $30,000 annually. So this is probably still a side thing for them. But they're really looking to find work-life balance and increase their revenue at the same time. So that's the one program. And then we'll probably offer that through our nonprofit partners as well. And then the next one, which is the big kahuna, that'll be next May. So I used to have a branding accelerator program that took 12 weeks. I figured out how to shrink it down into 4 days. So you walk in, and in 4 days, you're rebranded. So that's what's going to happen in May of next year. And so we're getting prepared for that. But that's pretty much been the journey and been the path. And it all happened because I understood from working as a consultant the importance of constantly monitoring your data and monitoring the health of your business so that things don't catch you by surprise.
Yes, I like that. When I was in college, I had a professor that would always say, look at the world with open eyes. And it's interesting because when we go out, when we do things, when we're seeing how quickly our clients are paying us, so some stuff might just be an anomaly, right? They might be paying us slower because their AP clerk was on vacation and they lost our invoice. Could be, but it could be that they're getting paid slower. They don't have the cash flow to pay us. So we want to keep our eye on that. And I think that when we look around, there's always signs that are telling us where things are going. And, it's funny, animals do this naturally, right? They're constantly looking, okay, because they don't have, newspapers and books to read. They're relying on the signs of leaves falling, or it's getting colder, or the other animals are moving to tell them. And of course, it's part of their DNA, but it's part of ours as well. Like we're built with this ability to look around and say, what's happening to me, and I think that like the ability to do that was really good because you were able to sort of predict what was going to happen and then make a decision on it. Because one of the worst things is being caught flat-footed, which can happen to anybody, but we definitely want to be on our toes. So, yeah.
Definitely. And I'll say, like, several of my peers that were in business are no longer in business. And it was just like one of the biggest things that I've learned this year, because now I'm like reaping the benefits. This year we're tripling revenue in the middle of a recession, like freaking unheard of. But one of the things I realized was there's two things that separates business that can survive years and years and years, or I'll say two things that separates like really, really good business leaders and I won't say bad business leaders, but not really good business leaders. And that's number one, understanding that things can always change and not being so shocked by change that you don't move. And then number two, making decisions and acting quickly. Because like I said, it can take anywhere from 6 months to a year for a client to close. So if I just realized today that we were in a recession, I would be in a lot of trouble. But because I was able to start last summer or the summer of 2022, last summer, I can't keep track of the year. Yeah, last summer, I was able to build a pipeline to set me up for this year. And while everyone else is still trying to figure it out, I've already secured market share and started to build a brand in that section of the market. And that's what I mean when I say it really separates the two, because a lot of people, just because something worked once and twice and 3 times and 4 times, it can always change. The market can always change. And don't second guess your gut feeling. And my gut feeling was that the coaching space, which is the space I was in, was on the decline and I needed to get out quick because something was up. It was just, things just weren't, I was getting different responses. I was doing the same exact marketing, but I wasn't seeing the same results. And that's what told me like something had changed. And then I was willing to make a change and make a shift, even though it felt drastic, even though I felt like, oh my gosh, you spent 2 years building this and now you're kind of throwing it all away. Because that's how it feels. And I mean, to a certain extent, I did throw it all away. But now look, you know what I mean? So it's just like, see what you see, accept what you see, and then make a decision and move quickly. Because while other people are waiting to see if it's real, you're already taking the steps to get to the next spot. And you'll beat them there, and then they'll have to catch up with you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, we're recording this November of 2023, just in case someone's trying to get a grip of the years. Especially if somebody listens to this, in the future where we publish this. But yeah, I think you're bang on with trying to and making sure that you're kind of have your finger on the pulse and making those decisions. And like you said, making those decisions quick. So one thing I want to talk about is the fact that like I see on LinkedIn that you do a lot of things that you're engaged with, like a lot of giving back, and so you're involved in different communities. And so I just wanted to have you talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a really important thing for us to do, is to find places that we can give back and kind of support, the communities that we're interested in.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of my opportunities to give back have people have just approached me with it. And so there's always a way that I can help. And then the other thing is, a lot of times I also seek out opportunities to connect with potential clients. And as a result, like, yes, I may be supporting a cause by buying a table or something like that. But at the same time, I'm now in the room with these people. So there's room for you to really do both. And then the other thing I will say is, community service and things are critical and important, but as a business owner, and I see a lot of this, you have to put your mask on first.
Mhm.
So if your business is flailing and you don't have revenue, you shouldn't be worrying about what your community outreach strategy is or anything like that. Like, one thing at a time. The first year or two of my business, I was 100% focused on us, because that's where my focus needed to be. Once you get to a stable place, then you'll be able to really leverage those opportunities to give back to the places you want to give back to, and also like find yourself into rooms that you know that you should be in as well. So I think it's rewarding work, but you definitely got to put your mask on first, because like I said, I see a lot of people who are out and they're doing all this community work and they're struggling in their business, and it's because they're spreading their resources too thin. There's a time and place for everything. And so you've got to know, okay, now I'm in a space where I can really comfortably give back and not worry.
Yes. Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, it really is about being responsible, because we have to be responsible to, for ourselves. And I think about accountability. I think I've talked about this before. Like I said, accountability, people will say, how do I make somebody else accountable? And we can only be accountable to ourselves. Like, accountability really comes down to us. I can't make somebody do something they don't want to do, or see something they don't want to see. But when we have a business, we are accountable to that business, because that business is really part of us. And it's not us. I mean, it's separate, but we're putting our time, our effort, and our creative energy into it, and we want to make sure that's successful. And you're right. I think the law of reciprocity is really around. I mean, we want to share, but to share something, and we don't want to be sharing going into debt. We want to be hunkering down and making sure we're doing the work. And if it means, yeah, working on a Friday night rather than going out to put on a front, you're better off working. So it's yeah, do the work. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, now that I have a team, I will say it puts an extra fire under you, because it's really not about you anymore. I mean, it is about you, but it's not about you, because at the end of the day, like, you have a team that believes in your vision. They believe in the work you do. I mean, people who work for small businesses, like, they're different. They're different because they're not there to climb any corporate ladder. There's no corporate ladder for them to climb, right? They're really there because they love what you do. They love how you're doing it, and they want to support you in what you're doing. And so it's so important that you, when you're thinking of the revenue equation, you're also keeping just in the back of your mind that, hey, I've got employees that are counting on me to make good decisions. And if you're ever, tinkering on the edge of a bad decision, I encourage you to look at any of the failed companies' videos. Look at the sad people walking out of the buildings and say, I refuse for that to be me, and I will make the best decisions for this company so that we don't end up there. Because that is a possibility, and you just don't want to be there. And it's so critical for you to treat your employees with that respect of just saying, like, if we get there, I've done every single thing I can do. And it wasn't because I made like some terrible investment or mistake that could have easily, been figured out. But it was really just because it just wasn't working anymore for some reason. But a lot of times I find it rolls back to what I said earlier, which is study the market and making that quick change, just being able to make the decision and move quickly so that you don't end up in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Well, thanks, Gabby. How can people reach you? Because I mean, I think we can probably talk all afternoon. This has been fun. Actually, I really, really enjoyed this. How can people reach you if they want to reach out, or they want to find your services, or even just say hi? How can they find you?
So I would say, home base for me is LinkedIn. So you can find me there. Gabriella Payne. My wedding is next weekend. So I'll be Gabriella Cray after next Saturday. So you may have to search me there. But I will say, if you are a nonprofit, definitely follow us on our business page. That's where our nonprofit stuff lives. If you're a business owner, which is what I assume most of the people here are going to be, follow us on our Instagram, which is Boss Blueprint Co. And there we have all the information on our programs, and we'll also share what nonprofit partners we're working with there too, so that you can get resources through those nonprofits as well. So that's the best way to reach me, is usually LinkedIn for my home base if you're just kind of trying to figure things out, and then Instagram for the entrepreneurs. And if you're just trying to see the whole picture, you could just go to our website, thebossblueprint.co, no M.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll have all that in the show notes. So, and I'll put your new LinkedIn. I think your contact, probably your URL or whatever, it probably will remain the same, I think, but I'll keep my eye on it and see.
Sure. Yeah, I think it may have changed. I think it may have changed. So yeah, I'll send everything over to you. Just let me know what you
think. We'll get that, and then people could get easy access to that. So perfect. Well, thanks, Gabby. I appreciate you talking with us today. I think this has been good, and some great advice, and you really laid out a good path to how your consulting career has gone. So I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.